Welcome, dear viewers, to another episode of English Insight. Today, we invite you to explore a remarkable story that touches both the heart and the earth. It is a story about perseverance, nature, and the incredible power of one individual to make a difference. And yes, it's also a chance for you to practice real English in a natural and meaningful way. Our story today comes from the diverse and beautiful land of India. But this is not a tale about ancient temples or bustling cities. This is a true story about a single man, a barren island, and a dream that would change the landscape forever. The story is titled, "The Man Who Planted a Forest." Before we begin, let me tell you how this video will help you. If you're learning English, you'll hear natural vocabulary used in a real context. You'll learn how to follow a story in English, sentence by sentence. You'll hear new words, useful phrases, and expressions that native speakers use. And most importantly, you'll remember them because you'll connect them with a powerful story. You'll also hear spoken English at a clear, steady pace. We pause after each sentence so you can understand everything fully. This makes it easier to follow along, even if you're not a fluent speaker yet. So whether you're a beginner or an intermediate learner, this story will help you grow your skills. Now let's talk about why this story matters. In a time when climate change is a global crisis, this story reminds us that one person's actions truly can make a difference. It's not about big money, technology, or fame. It's about patience, care, and belief in something greater than yourself. The hero of this story didn't wait for the government to act. He didn't give long speeches or write policy papers. He simply planted one tree, and then another, and then thousands more, every day, for years. That one small act became a lifelong mission, and over time, it transformed a barren sandbar into a thriving forest, larger than New York's Central Park. This is a story of quiet determination and natural beauty, and yes, it's all absolutely true. So stay with us until the end. You'll be inspired, you'll improve your English, and you'll walk away knowing that big change can start with just one small step. Are you ready? Let's begin the journey of the man who planted a forest, only here on English Insight. Now that you know the story's theme, let's set the scene. Our story takes place in the far northeastern part of India. There in the state of Assam flows one of the largest rivers in the world. It is called the Brahmaputra River. The Brahmaputra is wide, strong, and sometimes dangerous. It brings water to millions of people, but it also brings floods. In the middle of this great river is a small island. This island is called Majuli. Majuli is one of the largest river islands on Earth. But it is shrinking every year. Why? Because the river's floods eat away the land. Let's take a moment to understand this. When rivers flood, they carry strong waves. These waves break the edges of the island. The soil washes away. The land becomes smaller. This is called soil erosion. Over the years, flood after flood hit the island. The land became dry and cracked. The rich forest that once grew there started to vanish. Trees were gone. The air became hot and dusty. Without trees, the island could not hold the soil. Without soil, plants could not grow. And without plants, the animals began to leave. Some animals died. Others ran far away, never to return. The island became a place of silence. No birds sang in the morning. No animals walked through the forest. Because the forest was gone. It was a place of sand and sorrow, just sand, just river, just dry land and empty space. Imagine standing there. You hear the sound of the river, but not of life. You see the sun, but no shade from trees. You feel the dry wind, but not the song of birds. People on the island were losing hope. Every year the river took more land. Every year more trees were gone. And with them the animals disappeared. This is where our story begins. Not with beauty, but with loss. Not with green, but with grey. The island was dying. But someone saw more than just sand and floods. Someone believed it could be different. Someone looked at this dry, broken island and saw a future. Who was, and how could one man fight a river? We'll find out in the next chapter. Here on English Insight, after planting his first tree, Jadhav Payeng did not stop. He planted a tree the next day, and the day after that. Every single day he planted at least one tree. He had no money, no help from the government, no machines, just his hands and his time. In the beginning it was very hard. The sand was dry, the sun was hot, there was no shade, no shelter. But Jadhav kept going. He carried water from the river, buckets of water, one by one. He used them to water the small plants. He protected them from animals and storms. When the rains came, the young trees nearly drowned. When the heat returned, they nearly burned. But Jadhav stood beside them. He worked through the storms. He worked under the burning sun. He planted bamboo. He planted native trees that could survive the tough soil. Slowly the roots began to hold the land. The soil became stronger. Day by day the plants started to grow. They grew taller, greener, and stronger. Birds started to return. Insects came first, then butterflies. Jadhav kept planting. He planted thousands of trees over many years. He gave the land back to nature. He gave his time, his energy, and his heart. Still, he was alone. No one came to help. The government did not notice him. The newspapers did not write about him. But Jadhav did not care. He was not planting for fame. He was planting for the future. The years passed. The trees grew taller. Their roots reached deep into the ground. The sand turned into soil. Soon, the small patch of trees became a grove. Then it became a woodland. And finally, it became a forest. A real forest. Full of trees, plants, grass, and green. It stretched over hundreds of acres. It was larger than many city parks. And it was all planted by one man. Now the wildlife returned. Birds nested in the trees. Deer came to eat the grass. Monkeys swung from the branches. And then, even bigger animals came. Elephants walked through the forest. They rested in the shade. They drank water from small ponds. One day, forest officials saw tiger tracks. A tiger had come to live there. A real wild tiger, in a forest planted by hand. This was no longer a dead island. It was full of life, full of color, full of sound. The island was no longer dry. It was no longer silent. It was green. The forest had returned. People began to notice. They asked, who planted this forest? They could not believe it was just one man. But it was true. Jadhav Payeng had done it all by himself. He had carried the water. He had planted the trees. He had worked through the seasons. He had protected the plants like his children. His story began to spread. Journalists came to meet him. TV stations filmed him working in the forest. Scientists came to study the trees. Everyone was amazed, but Jadhav stayed the same. He still woke up early. He still walked to the forest. He still planted new trees. When people asked him why he kept planting, he said, I do it for nature, I do it for the earth. He understood something many people forget, that patience builds great things. That small acts, repeated every day, can change the world. He did not wait for change. He became the change. The forest he planted is now known as Molai Forest, named after Jadhav's nickname, Molai. It covers over 1,300 acres of land. That's more than 15 times the size of a football field, and it is still growing. This forest now protects the island. The trees stop the floods. Their roots hold the land together. The island is no longer shrinking. It is alive. All of this began with one tree, one boy, one dream. He did not ask, can I do this? He simply began, and he never stopped. Jadhav Payeng is called the Forest Man of India. He has received awards and honors, but for him the best reward is watching the trees grow. He says nature gives us everything. We must give back. His story is more than just planting trees. It is about faith, about determination, about love for the earth. His forest is not only green, it is full of hope. It shows what one person can do. It reminds us that we all have the power to grow something beautiful. You don't need to plant a whole forest, but you can plant a seed in the ground or in your heart. one act, one day, that is how change begins. Now we've reached the part of the story that feels almost magical, but it's not a myth. It's a living, breathing reality. The forest that Jadav Paeng planted now stretches across more than 1,300 acres. That's bigger than many city parks. It's bigger than some entire towns. Think about that. What was once just sand and silence is now a thriving jungle. A jungle full of trees, plants, birds and animals. A jungle that stands tall and green in the middle of the river. This forest has a name now. It is called Molai Forest. Molai is Jadav Paeng's childhood nickname. And so the forest is named after the man who created it. But Jadav Paeng doesn't call it his forest. He says it belongs to nature. He says it belongs to the animals, the birds and the river. He says I only helped it come back. And it truly has come back. Nature has returned. Trees have returned. Wildlife has returned. Today, Molai Forest is full of life. There are hundreds of species of trees. Birds sing in the canopy. Insects buzz in the grass. Deer walk freely among the trees. Wild boars dig in the soil. Elephants travel through the forest in quiet herds. And yes, even tigers have made this forest their home. It's hard to believe, isn't it? A forest this wild, this rich, started with just one tree, planted by one man, but it's real. Molai Forest is now studied by scientists from around the world. They come to see how one person could rebuild an ecosystem. They walk through the trees, take notes, and shake their heads in amazement. Government officials now recognize Molai Forest as an environmental treasure. It's protected by the state of Assam. Forest rangers monitor the area. Conservation groups work to keep it safe. And yet Jadav Paeng still lives a simple life. He lives near the forest. He wakes up early. And yes, he still plants trees. He is often called the forest man of India. He has spoken at international events. He has met world leaders. He has received awards and honors. But he says his biggest joy is hearing the birds return, seeing the forest grow, and knowing the world is a little greener than before. His story has now been told in books, documentaries and classrooms. Children in schools learn about the boy who planted a forest. College students study his methods. Environmental activists take inspiration from his actions. Molai Forest is now more than just a place. It is a symbol of hope, a symbol of what one person can do. It teaches us an important lesson, that we don't have to wait for someone else to fix the planet. We can start with what we have, right where we are. The world today is facing many challenges: climate change, pollution, deforestation. But Jadav Paeng reminds us that change is possible. He reminds us that healing the earth is not only about big plans. Sometimes it begins with a small action, a seed, a shovel, a quiet decision to plant something instead of walking away. Molai Forest now helps protect the island of Majuli. The trees hold the soil in place. They slow down floods. They keep the island strong. What was once dying is now alive. What was once dry is now green. When people walk through Molai Forest, they feel peace. They feel wonder. They hear the wind in the leaves and the songs of unseen birds. Many visitors say it's like stepping into another world. A world made by hand. A world grown from patience and love. Let's pause and think about that word, patience. Jadav's forest didn't grow in a day. It took decades. Years of planting, watering, protecting, and waiting. But it worked, and now it stands strong as a reminder to us all. So what can we learn from this forest? We learn that even one person can protect the planet. We learn that small actions add up. We learn that the earth responds when we care. Whether you live in a city or a village, whether you have land or not, you can do something. You can reuse. You can recycle. You can plant. You can teach others. And most importantly, you can believe in your ability to make a difference. Just like Jadav Paeng believed, Molai Forest today is not only a place, it is a living story. It shows the power of kindness to the earth. And the next time someone tells you that one person can't change the world, tell them about the boy who planted a forest. Tell them about the dry island that turned green. Tell them about the tigers, the trees, the jungle, and the dream. And tell them it's all true.
because it is.
Now we come to the heart of this story. The message, the lesson, the reason we shared it with you on English Insight. This story is not just about trees. It's about life. It's about learning. It's about you. Let's begin with the most important truth. Nature matters. Trees are not just decorations on Earth. They are the lungs of our planet. They give us oxygen. They clean the air we breathe. They protect the soil. They cool the ground. They give homes to animals and birds. When trees disappear, so does life. When forests fall, the earth begins to suffer. Floods increase. Heat rises. The air becomes dirty. But when trees grow, when forests return, so does hope. So does life. This is why Molai Forest is so important. It shows us what trees can do. It shows us what one forest can change. And most of all, it shows us what one person can do. Now let's focus on that idea. One person, just one. Jadav Payeng didn't have money. He didn't have power. He didn't have followers, a title, or a plan on paper. But he had a dream. He looked at an island full of sand and thought, I can make this green again. He didn't wait for help. He didn't wait for the government. He didn't wait for the perfect moment. He took one small action. He planted one tree. Then the next day he planted another, and another. Day after day, month after month, year after year. This is the second great message of the story. Small actions, done every day, create big change. Not fast, not loud, but real. And lasting. Too often we wait. We wait for someone to give us permission. We wait for the perfect tools. We wait until we feel ready. But Jadav didn't wait. He started with his hands. He started with his time. And he used patience. That word is important. Patience. Forests do not grow in a week. Language is not learned in a day. Great things come slowly, like trees, and like confidence. If you are learning English, this story is for you too. Because the lesson is the same. Start small. Start today. Don't wait for the perfect accent. Don't wait until your grammar is perfect. Just start. Just plant the seed. Every new word you learn is like a tiny leaf. Every sentence you speak is like a young tree. Every time you try, your language forest begins to grow. Sometimes it will feel slow. Sometimes it will feel hard. Sometimes people may laugh. But don't stop. Keep practicing. Keep repeating. Keep planting. Because just like Jadav's forest, your growth will come. Not in one day, but in many. Remember, Molai Forest started with one tree. And now it is more than 1,300 acres of land. This story teaches us that the greatest progress is not made by doing something big once. It is made by doing something small, many times, every day, with love. Jadav Payeng didn't shout. He didn't demand attention. He created hope through quiet action. He believed in the power of nature. He believed in his hands. He believed that the future could be better. So ask yourself today, what small seed can I plant? In my garden, in my city, in my heart, what forest do I want to grow? In my language, in my habits, in my mind. Let's return to that powerful message. Don't stop, one day at a time. This is the heart of the story. It's the message for the earth. It's the message for learners. It's the message for all of us. The world needs more forests. But it also needs more patience, more kindness, more people who believe they can make a difference. You are one of those people. Your actions matter. Your words matter. Your effort matters. Whether you're planting trees or planting dreams, you are creating a better world. One small action, every single day. That is how forests grow. That is how fluency grows. That is how you grow. So if you ever feel tired, if you feel like giving up, if your goals feel too far away, remember the boy on the island. Remember the forest. Remember the animals that came back. Remember the green that returned. And remember this, don't stop, one day at a time. Now that you've heard the amazing story of Jadav Payeng, it's time to practice vocabulary. You've listened to the powerful true story of Jadav Payeng, the man who planted a forest. Now let's check how much you remember. We'll ask you 20 questions about the story. After each question, take a few seconds to think or say your answer out loud. Then we'll give you the correct answer and you'll repeat it aloud for practice. Let's begin. 1. Where did Jadav Payeng live? Think about the place. Answer: Jadav Payeng lived on the island of Majuli in Assam, India. Now you say it. Jadav Payeng lived on the island of Majuli in Assam, India. 2. What did he plant every day? Think about his daily action. Answer: he planted a tree every day. Now you say it. He planted a tree every day. 3. Why did he start planting trees? Think about what he saw on the land. Answer: he saw the land was dying and animals were disappearing. Now you say it. He saw the land was dying and animals were disappearing. What kind of family did Jadav come from? Think about his childhood. Answer: he came from a poor tribal family. Now you say it. He came from a poor tribal family. 5. What happened to the forest on the island? What was the problem with nature? Answer: the forest disappeared because of floods and erosion. Now you say it. The forest disappeared because of floods and erosion. 6. How did Jadav water the young trees? Remember how he helped them grow? Answer: he carried water from the river in buckets. Now you say it. He carried water from the river in buckets. 6. Did Jadav receive help from the government? Yes or no? Answer: no, he did not receive help from the government. Now you say it. No, he did not receive help from the government. 8. What kind of weather did he work in? Think about the conditions. Answer: he worked in heat, rain and storms. Now you say it. He worked in heat, rain and storms. No. What was the name of the forest he created? What did people call it? Answer: it is called Malai Forest. Now you say it. It is called Malai Forest. 10. What animals returned to the forest? Think about the wildlife. Answer: birds, deer, elephants, and tigers returned to the forest. Now you say it. Birds, deer, elephants, and tigers returned to the forest. 11. How large is Malai Forest today? Think in acres. Answer: Malai Forest is over 1,1300 acres. Now you say it. Malai Forest is over 1,1300 acres. 12. What does the forest help protect? Think about its role for the land. Answer: it helps protect the island from floods and erosion. Now you say it. It helps protect the island from floods and erosion. 13. What is Jadav Payeng's nickname? It's also part of the forest's name. Answer: his nickname is Malai. Now you say it. His nickname is Malai. 13. What lesson does this story teach us about the environment? Think about trees and action. Answer: it teaches us that trees are important and we must protect nature. Now you say it. It teaches us that trees are important and we must protect nature. 15. What lesson does this story teach about personal action? Think about how change happens. Answer: one small action every day can make a big change. Now you say it. One small action every day can make a big change. 16. Did Jadav plant for fame or money? Yes or no? Answer: no, he planted trees out of love for nature. Now you say it. No, he planted trees out of love for nature. 17. How do the trees help the soil? Think about erosion. Answer: the roots hold the soil and stop erosion. Now you say it. The roots hold the soil and stop erosion. 18. How long did it take to grow the forest? Think in years. Answer: it took many years of planting and patience. Now you say it. It took many years of planting and patience. 18. How did Jadav feel when animals came back? What was his emotion? Answer: he felt happy and proud when the animals returned. Now you say it. He felt happy and proud when the animals returned. 20. What message does Jadav's story give to English learners? Think about daily progress. Answer: don't stop, one day at a time. Now you say it. Don't stop, one day at a time. Final review. Great job. You've just answered 20 questions in English. This helps improve your memory, grammar, and speaking skills. Let's repeat the key message of the story one more time. Don't stop, one day at a time. Now you say it. Don't stop, one day at a time. You're not just learning English, you're learning how to grow your own forest of words, of ideas, of confidence. Thank you for being part of this journey with English Insight. If you enjoyed this story and practice session, make sure to like, subscribe and share it. And remember, learning grows when you care for it every day. You've just finished one of the most powerful stories we've ever shared on English Insight. Let's take a moment to remember what we've learned. This was not a story from a fantasy book. It was not a story with magic or superheroes. It was a real story, about a real man, on a real island. His name is Jadav Payeng. He was just a boy from a small village in India. He saw his home being destroyed by time, water, and neglect, but instead of running away, he acted. He didn't wait for others. He didn't beg for money or attention. He simply planted a tree, and then he planted another, and another. He planted trees for more than 30 years. No machine, no team, just his hands, his time and his heart. Today, that land is green. It is alive. It is a forest. More than 1,300 acres of trees, animals and natural beauty. A forest named after him, Malai Forest. And what began as a one-man mission is now an example for the whole world. So what is the message of this story? Let's say it together. Small actions every day can make a big change. That message is not only for nature, it's for your life, it's for your future, it's for your English. Let's think about that. You may be at the beginning of your English journey. You may feel nervous, unsure, or slow. But remember this. Jadav's forest didn't appear overnight. It didn't grow in a week. It took years. It took patience. And so does English. You learn one word today. You speak one sentence tomorrow. You listen to one story the next day. That's how growth happens. That's how your language forest begins. And guess what? Every time you read, every time you listen, every time you try, you're planting a seed. Maybe you don't see the results yet, but they are there. Your roots are growing. The more you stay with it, the more it grows. The more you care for it, the stronger it becomes. One day, you'll look back and realize you've created something powerful. So here's our message for you today. If you can plant a forest, you can grow your English. One word at a time. Let's say it again together. If you can plant a forest, you can grow your English, one word at a time. This is what English Insight is all about. Real stories, real English, real inspiration. You're not just watching a video. You're building your future. Word by word, day by day. Let's take a moment to reflect. What did this story make you feel? What did it teach you about nature, about language, about yourself? Here's something we want you to do. In the comments below, answer this question. What's your favorite tree and why? Is it the tall oak, the peaceful banyan, the cherry blossom, the coconut tree from your childhood village, or the strong pine you see every day outside your window? Tell us. Let's grow this conversation together, just like a forest. We'd love to hear from you. And we reply to many of your comments. So don't be shy. Write in English and watch your skills bloom. And while you're here, don't forget to do 3 simple things. Like this video, comment your favorite trees, and subscribe to English Insight for more inspiring stories and real-world English. You can even share this video with a friend, especially someone who loves nature or who's learning English, just like you. Every share plants a new seed of learning. Before we end, let's say our final message one more time. Nice and slow. Don't stop, one day at a time. Again, don't stop, one day at a time. This story is not just Jadav's story. It's your story too, because you are growing, and you are not alone. We are here with you. Together we are planting a forest of English. Together we are creating change. Thank you for watching English Insight. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep planting your future. Goodbye and take care.